I never suspected that Quinn's late nights at the office would lead me to the painful truth. The evening air was warm as I sat on the back patio, the soft strumming of my guitar filling the silence. My fingers moved instinctively over the strings, yet my mind was a whirlwind of uncertainty. I had noticed the subtle changes in Quinn lately, her late meetings, the lingering perfume on her clothes, the way she sometimes seemed distant even when we were together. But I always brushed aside the doubts, convincing myself it was just the pressures of her job. That night, after another long day, I poured myself a glass of Merlot and settled into our cozy living room. The soft light from the lamp cast gentle shadows on the walls, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I decided to call Lily. She had been my sounding board during tough times, and I needed someone to talk to. As we chatted, I could hear her laughter, a sound that always warmed my heart. "Kurt, have you thought about taking her out for a surprise dinner? Just the two of you?" she suggested. "Yeah, maybe," I replied absently, swirling the wine in my glass. I wished I could shake off the unease gnawing at me. When Quinn finally returned home, she slipped in quietly, her cheeks flushed and her eyes sparkling with something I couldn't quite identify. She wore a new dress that hugged her curves perfectly, the soft fabric clinging to her body in all the right places. I felt a flicker of desire, but it was quickly overshadowed by my lingering suspicions. "Hey babe, how was your day?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Busy as always," she replied, her voice smooth and almost melodic, but there was an edge to it. "I just had a meeting with Daniel about the new campaign." The name hit me like a punch. Daniel, her boss. A man whose confidence and charm were palpable, someone who always had the best ideas in the room. I couldn't help but picture him standing close to her, their chemistry igniting a spark I had long taken for granted. That night, as we shared a dinner of seared salmon and asparagus, I watched her closely. The way she laughed at my jokes seemed a little forced, and I couldn't ignore the way her gaze drifted to her phone, checking for messages. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to sound nonchalant. "Yeah, just some work stuff," she said quickly, but I saw the flicker of guilt in her eyes. Later, as we settled into bed, the tension hung thick in the air. I wanted to reach out, to draw her close and feel her warmth, but I hesitated. Instead, I lay there, thoughts racing, imagining the worst. What if she had crossed a line with Daniel? What if the intimacy we once shared had been compromised by her desires for another man? As I drifted into an uneasy sleep, my dreams were haunted by visions of Quinn and Daniel together, laughter spilling into the night, her body entwined with his. It was a betrayal that felt all too real, and I couldn't help but wonder if I had been blind to the signs all along. The following day was a blur of work and restless thoughts. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was teetering on the edge of a cliff, and one more push could send me spiraling into darkness. During lunch, I met up with Mark, who could always lighten my mood, but as we sat at our favorite craft beer spot, I felt distant, lost in my thoughts. "Dude, what's up with you? You seem out of it," Mark said, taking a sip of his IPA. "It's Quinn." "I don't know, man. I just feel like something's off," I confessed, my heart racing as I spoke the words. Mark raised an eyebrow. "You think she's cheating?" I swallowed hard, the possibility hanging in the air like a storm cloud. "I don't know. But I can't shake this feeling." As the days went by, the weight of my suspicions grew heavier, gnawing at my gut. Quinn continued her routine, but I began to notice the little things, the way she brushed past me when I reached for her, the subtle shift in her gaze when I asked about her day, the almost electric tension that seemed to linger in the air whenever we were together. That Saturday, while Quinn was out for a yoga class, I found myself scrolling through her social media, searching for clues. I knew I shouldn't invade her privacy, but my heart was racing, and the need for answers was overpowering. I stumbled upon a photo of her with Daniel at a company event, both of them looking happy, too happy. The way they stood close, his hand resting lightly on her back, it was a punch to the gut. I slammed my laptop shut and leaned back in my chair, my heart pounding in my chest. I felt like a voyeur in my own life, watching my wife share moments with another man, moments I thought were reserved for us. My mind was a chaotic mix of jealousy and anger, a cocktail that left a bitter taste in my mouth. When Quinn returned home, I forced a smile, hiding the turmoil brewing inside me. "How was yoga?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. "It was great. Just what I needed," she replied, a glimmer of enthusiasm in her eyes. I nodded, but inside I was screaming. How could she be so carefree when I was falling apart? That night, as we lay in bed, I couldn't help but let my mind wander to darker places. I pictured Quinn in Daniel's arms, the way he would pull her close, whisper sweet nothings in her ear, the heat of their bodies pressed together. I felt the stirrings of desire rise within me, conflicting with the pain of betrayal. In an unexpected moment of vulnerability, I turned to her. "Quinn, do you think we're okay?" She glanced at me, surprise flickering across her face. "Of course, Kurt. Why do you ask?" "I don't know. Sometimes I feel like something's missing." My heart raced as I spoke, hoping to draw her closer, to reignite the spark between us. She reached for my hand, her touch warm and familiar, but I could sense a barrier between us, an unspoken distance. "We can always talk about it," she said softly, but I couldn't shake the feeling that her mind was elsewhere, perhaps with Daniel. As I drifted off to sleep that night, I made a decision. I needed to confront the truth, to find out if my fears were grounded in reality, or merely the product of my imagination. The thought terrified me, but the potential for revelation, for understanding what was happening in my marriage, was a journey I could no longer avoid. I resolved to gather my courage and face the storm head-on. Whether it would lead to reconciliation or heartache, I knew I had to seek the truth, no matter where it might lead. The next morning dawned with an unsettling clarity. The sun filtered through the curtains, casting soft shadows across our bedroom, and for a moment, everything felt normal. I watched Quinn as she stirred, her hair cascading over the pillow, her face peaceful. But beneath the surface, my heart raced with the weight of my suspicions. As she got ready for the day, I couldn't help but admire her figure in the mirror. She slipped on a fitted blouse that accentuated her curves and a pair of tailored pants that hugged her hips just right. I felt a familiar pull of desire, yet it was laced with a twinge of betrayal. How could I feel so drawn to her while my mind screamed that something was wrong? "Are you going to join me for breakfast?" she asked, glancing back at me with a smile that made my heart flutter. "Sure, I'll be there in a minute," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. As she made her way to the kitchen, I took a moment to collect myself, watching her from the doorway. She poured herself a cup of coffee, her movements fluid and graceful. I felt a mix of admiration and anguish, remembering how we used to share intimate breakfasts, laughter mingling with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. I joined her at the table, and we made small talk, but the atmosphere felt charged, as if a storm was brewing just beneath the surface. I struggled to maintain a semblance of normalcy, but each shared smile felt like a facade, hiding the truth that threatened to shatter our world. "Hey, I was thinking," Quinn said, her eyes sparkling. "Maybe we should plan a little getaway soon. Just the two of us." My heart raced at the suggestion. On one hand, the idea of escaping with her, reigniting our connection, was tempting. But on the other, it felt like a distraction from the looming confrontation I knew I had to face. "That sounds great," I replied, forcing a smile. "What did you have in mind? Maybe the cabin upstate? We could hike, unwind, and just enjoy each other's company." The thought of being secluded in a cabin, just the two of us, stirred something deep within me, an erotic vision of what could happen away from the prying eyes of the city. The idea of rekindling our intimacy was appealing, yet a voice in my head warned me that I couldn't ignore the shadows lurking between us. After breakfast, as Quinn headed out for her morning yoga class, I decided to take a different approach. I pulled out my laptop, determined to do some digging. I opened her social media accounts again, searching for anything that could give me more insight into her relationship with Daniel. My heart raced with every click, each scroll bringing a mix of anticipation and dread. I stumbled upon a post, a picture of Quinn and Daniel at a swanky rooftop bar, glasses raised, their laughter almost tangible through the screen. They looked so comfortable, so connected. I felt a jolt of jealousy. What had they shared that I had not been privy to? The thought of Daniel's hand on her waist, his eyes sparkling with mischief as they shared drinks, ignited a fire of anger within me. I closed the laptop with a slam, needing to distance myself from the pain of betrayal. It was then that I remembered a conversation with Lily about the importance of communication in a relationship. Maybe it was time to approach Quinn, to ask the hard questions. When she returned from yoga, she seemed rejuvenated, a glow about her that momentarily distracted me from my torment. "You should join me next time," she suggested, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. "Maybe," I replied noncommittally, trying to keep my composure. Later that evening, as we sat on the couch, I turned to her. "Quinn, we need to talk." My voice was steadier than I felt, but the urgency in my heart propelled me forward. She looked at me, her expression shifting from playful to serious. "What's wrong?" I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of my words. "I've been feeling like something's off between us. I can't help but wonder, is there something going on with you and Daniel?" Her eyes widened in surprise, a flicker of guilt flashing across her face before she masked it with a smile. "Kurt, you know how work can be. Daniel and I have a professional relationship. It's nothing more." The denial stung, but I pressed on. "It's not just that. I see the way you act around him, and I can't shake the feeling that there's more beneath the surface." "Are you serious?" she exclaimed, frustration creeping into her tone. "You're reading too much into this. I can't believe you'd think that." The tension between us grew, electric and charged. I could feel the heat radiating from her, and despite the discomfort, a part of me was drawn to her defensiveness. "I just want honesty, Quinn. If there's something you need to tell me." Before I could finish, she cut me off. "Why are you bringing this up now? I thought we were okay." Her voice cracked, and in that moment, the floodgates opened. I felt my anger mix with the primal urge, the heat of our argument sparking something deeper within me. The attraction I felt towards her, even amidst the turmoil, surged back to the forefront. "Maybe we're not as okay as you think," I said, my voice low. I could see the realization wash over her, a flicker of desire crossing her features as we locked eyes. The air between us thickened, the tension shifting from anger to something more intimate. I moved closer, my heart pounding, drawn to her warmth and vulnerability. In a moment of reckless abandon, I cupped her face in my hands, brushing my lips against hers, tasting the wine still lingering from dinner. Quinn responded, her body instinctively leaning into me, her hands finding their way to my hair. The kiss deepened, igniting a spark I thought had dimmed. It was a collision of emotions, anger, passion, fear, and desire, all swirling together as we lost ourselves in each other. But as we pulled away, breathless, the reality of our situation came crashing back. "Kurt," she whispered, a mix of regret and longing in her eyes. "We can't just—" "I know," I interrupted, my voice barely a whisper. "But I can't pretend everything's fine either." That night, as we lay in bed, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and turmoil. Our connection had been reignited, but the specter of her affair still loomed over us, casting shadows on our intimacy. I was torn between the desire to reclaim what we had lost and the fear of the truth that was slowly unraveling before me. In the coming days, I resolved to confront Daniel. I needed to know, once and for all, what was happening between them. My heart raced at the thought, a mix of anger and determination propelling me forward. I would no longer be a passive observer in my own life. It was time to take control of my destiny, no matter how painful the path ahead might be. The following days dragged on like a never-ending haze, each moment stretching out as I steeled myself for the inevitable confrontation with Daniel. I replayed the images of Quinn and him laughing, their bodies close, in my mind like a cruel film reel. But amid my anxiety, there was an undeniable fire within me, a drive to reclaim my life and my wife. As Quinn went about her routine, I noticed little things that used to excite me. Her laughter, the way she moved, the glint in her eye, now sparked jealousy instead of joy. Every time she slipped on that fitted blouse or wore a dress that hugged her curves just right, I couldn't shake the image of Daniel admiring her, possibly even touching her in ways I used to. One evening, as we prepared dinner together, I watched her chop vegetables, her movements graceful yet somehow fraught with tension. "What do you want to make tonight?" she asked, glancing back at me with a bright smile that felt bittersweet. "Something comforting," I replied, forcing a smile back, though my thoughts were elsewhere. "Like pasta?" she suggested, her enthusiasm palpable. "Sure, let's do that," I said, pouring myself a glass of red wine, needing the warmth of alcohol to steady my nerves. As the sauce simmered, I turned to her, leaning against the counter. "Quinn, can we talk about this weekend?" Her brow furrowed slightly. "What about it?" "I think we should still go to the cabin, but I want us to really connect, to be honest with each other." The words hung heavy in the air, my heart racing as I sensed the weight of what I was proposing. She nodded, her expression shifting from surprise to contemplation. "I think that could be good for us," she said softly, her gaze lingering on me for a moment longer than usual. The evening went on, our conversation mixing with laughter and shared memories, but the undercurrent of tension remained. As I reached for her, I felt that familiar tug of desire, the need to bridge the gap that had formed between us. I leaned in closer, our bodies almost touching, and whispered, "You know, it's been a while since we had a night just for us." Quinn's breath hitched slightly, and I could see the flicker of want in her eyes. "I know it has," she admitted, her voice low and sultry. I moved closer, my hands resting on her waist, pulling her gently against me. The heat radiating from her body ignited something primal within me, something that pushed aside the lingering doubts. "Let's not waste this moment," I murmured, closing the distance between us. As our lips met, I felt the tension dissolve, replaced by a heat that surged through me like wildfire. It was a kiss filled with desperation and longing, a rawness that brought us closer together. I deepened the kiss, my hands exploring her back, fingers tracing the soft fabric of her blouse, urging her to forget the reality outside our kitchen. The world around us faded as I lost myself in her warmth, her body melting against mine, and for a fleeting moment, I felt as if we were the only two people on earth. But then the doubts crept back in, the nagging voice reminding me of the man who could be stealing these moments from me. We pulled apart, breathless, and I rested my forehead against hers, feeling a mix of desire and desperation. "Quinn, I need to know if you're being honest with me. I can't keep pretending." Her expression shifted, vulnerability shining through her sultry facade. "I'm here, aren't I? I love you, Kurt." Those words, so familiar yet fragile, stirred something deep within me. But as the warmth of our bodies lingered, I knew that love alone wouldn't mend the rift that was growing between us. I needed to confront Daniel, not just for myself, but for the sake of our marriage. The weekend arrived, and we packed for the cabin, the tension still simmering beneath the surface. The drive felt long, filled with silence that spoke louder than words. I stole glances at her, my mind racing with thoughts of how to approach the subject of her affair. Once we arrived, the cabin welcomed us with its rustic charm, the smell of pine filling the air. I set my bags down and looked at Quinn, who seemed both excited and nervous. "Let's go for a hike," I suggested, hoping to clear my mind before the inevitable confrontation. As we walked along the trail, the beauty of the landscape enveloped us, but my mind was elsewhere. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting golden hues on the trees, but all I could think about was the confrontation ahead. "You know," I said, trying to lighten the mood, "this place always reminds me of the first time we came here. Remember how we couldn't keep our hands off each other?" Quinn laughed, a light sound that echoed through the trees, and I felt a flicker of warmth. "Of course. We were like teenagers." Her eyes sparkled with mischief, and for a moment, I was lost in the memory of our youthful passion. As we reached a clearing, the view opened up before us, the vast expanse of nature stretching into the horizon. "It's beautiful here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It is," I replied, turning to her, sensing the moment was right. "But we need to talk." Her smile faded slightly, replaced by an expression of apprehension. "About what?" "About you and Daniel," I said, my heart pounding as I spoke. "I need to know what's really going on." Her gaze dropped, and I felt the weight of the moment pressing down on us. Kurt, I told you there's nothing between us. It's just work. Then why does it feel like there's so much more? I pressed, desperation creeping into my tone. I don't know. Maybe it's just complicated, she admitted, her voice trembling. Complicated how? I challenged, unable to contain the turmoil within me. The silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken truths. I could see her grappling with her thoughts, her eyes searching mine. And in that moment I felt a surge of desire to break through the walls that had grown between us. Quinn, I said softly, stepping closer, if there's something happening, I need you to be honest with me. It'll hurt less if we face it together. She inhaled sharply, her breath catching in her throat. Kurt, Before she could finish, I reached out, pulling her close, my lips crashing against hers with an urgency that had been building for days. The kiss was desperate, fueled by my need to understand, to connect, to reclaim the intimacy that felt so distant. Quinn responded, her arms wrapping around my neck, pulling me closer as our bodies pressed together. The passion between us surged, hot and electric, as I felt her heart racing against my chest. My hands slid down her waist, tracing the curves that had always captivated me. But as we kissed, a part of me couldn't help but wonder if this was enough to heal the rift that had formed between us. Would this passion endure, or was it merely a temporary escape from the reality that awaited us? As we pulled away, I searched her eyes, hoping to see the truth reflected back. Please, Quinn. Just tell me what's going on. I can't do this if I don't know where you stand. Tears welled in her eyes, and for a moment, I thought she might finally break down, but instead, she stepped back, putting distance between us. I need time to think, Kurt. This is all so much. I felt a wave of frustration wash over me. Time? Time for what? To decide whether you want to be with him or me? Her expression hardened, and I could see the struggle within her. It's not that simple. Then make it simple! I shouted, my voice echoing through the trees. I deserve to know. Quinn took a deep breath, her composure wavering. I never wanted to hurt you. Daniel and I, we have a connection. But it doesn't mean I don't love you. The admission struck me like a blow. I felt my heart shatter, pieces falling away as I processed her words. So there is something more? I don't know, Kurt. It's complicated, she repeated, frustration mingling with pain in her voice. I didn't plan for this to happen. I stepped back, reeling from the revelation. The man I had feared was not just a colleague, he was a potential rival for her heart. I can't believe this is happening, I whispered, my voice barely audible. I'm sorry, she said, her eyes pleading for understanding. I truly am. But I need to figure things out. As I stood there, feeling the weight of her words settle heavily in the air, I knew that the confrontation I had dreaded had only opened the door to more questions, more pain. The path ahead was uncertain, but I resolved to face it head-on. I would fight for us, for our love, no matter the cost. As we headed back to the cabin, the silence between us was deafening, each step echoing the gravity of our situation. But I refused to give up. Somewhere within the turmoil, I sensed a flicker of hope that we could navigate this storm together, as long as we both committed to the truth. And in that moment I knew I had to confront Daniel, not just for answers. As we returned to the cabin, the air felt thick with unspoken words, the tension coiling tighter with each step. I tried to focus on the beauty around us, the towering trees, the distant sounds of nature, but my mind was consumed by the reality of what I had just learned. Once inside, I took a moment to gather my thoughts. The cabin was warm and inviting, with the crackling fire casting dancing shadows on the walls. I could hear Quinn moving around in the kitchen, preparing dinner. I watched her for a moment, her back turned to me as she chopped vegetables, the soft sway of her hips igniting a flicker of desire amidst my turmoil. Do you want to help me with the pasta? She called over her shoulder, her voice cheerful but strained. Sure, I replied, my heart still heavy. I joined her at the counter, our bodies close as we worked together in silence. The scent of garlic filled the air, and I tried to push aside the turmoil swirling in my mind. As we cooked, I couldn't help but steal glances at her. She moved with an ease that I had always found alluring, her hands deftly working with the ingredients. I remembered how many times we had shared this routine, how intimacy was often forged in the simplest of moments. I wanted to reclaim that connection, to forget the chaos outside our walls. "Do you remember that time we made homemade pasta for the first time?" I asked, trying to bridge the distance between us. She turned, a smile breaking through her tension. "How could I forget? You nearly set the kitchen on fire." We shared a laugh, and for a moment, the weight of our conversation faded. I reached for her, drawing her close, our bodies just inches apart. "I miss those moments, Quinn. I miss us." Her expression softened, and I felt the heat radiating between us once more. In a moment of boldness, I leaned in, capturing her lips with mine, tasting the warmth of her breath mixed with the aroma of our cooking. She responded instantly, melting against me, her hands threading into my hair as she deepened the kiss. As we broke apart, breathless, I could see the flicker of desire in her eyes, but the reality of our situation pulled me back. "We need to talk about Daniel," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I know," she replied, her brow furrowed with worry. "But can we just enjoy tonight first? Just for a little while?" I hesitated, torn between the need to confront her about the affair and the desire to hold on to this moment. "Okay," I said finally, my heart aching. "But we can't ignore this forever." Dinner was a mix of laughter and shared glances, the pasta turning out perfectly despite the tension that lingered in the background. We reminisced about our past trips to the cabin, the joy of exploring nature, and the nights spent wrapped up in each other. I watched her eyes light up as she recalled our adventures, and it stirred something deep within me, a longing to return to the days when everything felt right. After dinner, as we cleaned up together, I felt the air shift once more. The fire crackled softly in the background, casting a warm glow that highlighted the curve of Quinn's neck, the softness of her skin. It was intoxicating, and despite the turmoil, I found myself drawn to her. "Let's have a drink by the fire," I suggested, my voice low and inviting. Quinn nodded, and we settled onto the couch in front of the fireplace, a bottle of wine in hand. The warmth of the flames enveloped us, and I could see the flicker of embers mirroring the emotions swirling within me. As I poured us each a glass, I glanced at her, watching the way the light danced across her features. "You look beautiful," I said, the sincerity in my voice breaking through the tension. "Thank you," she replied, her cheeks flushing slightly. "I've missed this." We clinked our glasses together, and I felt a surge of hope as we settled into the warmth of the moment. We talked about trivial things, our favorite movies, the best places to eat in the city, anything to push aside the weight of our reality, even just for a moment. But the connection we were rekindling was palpable, the chemistry between us undeniable. As the night deepened, I found myself inching closer, our knees brushing together, the warmth of her body pulling me in. "Do you remember the first time we kissed here?" I asked, my heart racing as I leaned in closer. A smile spread across her face, and her eyes sparkled with mischief. "Of course. You were so nervous, and I was so ready." I chuckled, the memory igniting a fire within me. "I was terrified I'd mess it up." Her gaze softened, and as the flames flickered in the hearth, I felt an undeniable pull to bridge the gap between us. "Kiss me again," I murmured, and the world outside faded away. Quinn leaned in, her lips brushing against mine softly at first, then deepening as we surrendered to the moment. The kiss was charged with an urgency that felt electric, igniting a passion that had been simmering beneath the surface. My hands found their way to her waist, pulling her closer as I felt her warmth against me. We kissed as if the world around us had disappeared, losing ourselves in the familiarity of each other's touch. The heat between us intensified, and I could feel the tension of our earlier conversation melting away as we explored the depths of our connection. But as our bodies pressed together, the reality of our situation loomed in the background. "Quinn," I whispered, pulling away just enough to catch my breath. "I want you to be mine, but we need to figure this out." She looked up at me, her eyes shimmering with desire, but there was an uncertainty that lingered. "I know, Kurt. But I need time to process everything." "Then let's make the most of this weekend," I suggested, my heart pounding in my chest. Let's remember why we fell in love in the first place. We spent the rest of the evening wrapped in each other's arms, sharing stories and laughter, the bond between us slowly healing, if only for a moment. As the fire crackled, I felt the warmth of her body against mine, a reminder of what we had fought so hard to preserve. But even as I held her close, I couldn't shake the feeling that the battle wasn't over. The confrontation with Daniel awaited, and I knew that our journey wasn't just about reclaiming our intimacy, but about facing the truth that had brought us to this moment. As we drifted off to sleep, entwined in each other's arms, I made a silent vow to confront Daniel. I would uncover the truth and reclaim my place in Quinn's heart, no matter what it took. The love we shared was worth fighting for, and I was determined to ensure that neither of us would lose sight of what truly mattered. The next morning, I woke up to the soft light filtering through the cabin windows, the warmth of Quinn's body pressed against mine, her breath a gentle rhythm against my skin. For a moment, I let myself revel in the intimacy of the moment, the memory of last night's passion lingering like a sweet perfume. It felt like we had taken a step back towards each other, a fragile truce in the face of our looming reality. As I lay there, I couldn't shake the feeling of urgency creeping back in. Today was the day I had to confront Daniel. The thought sent a shiver down my spine, but I couldn't ignore it any longer. I needed to know the truth about my wife and her boss. "Good morning," Quinn murmured, stirring slightly. Her voice was husky with sleep, and I could feel the warmth of her body radiating against mine. "Morning," I replied, trying to keep my tone light, though the weight of the day pressed heavily on my shoulders. She turned to face me, her dark hair tousled and framing her face. The sunlight danced across her features, highlighting the curve of her lips and the warmth in her eyes. I felt a rush of desire surge through me, the remnants of last night's passion still fresh in my mind. "Do you want to go for a hike this morning?" she asked, a hint of excitement in her voice. "Yeah, that sounds great," I said, though I knew I wouldn't be able to enjoy it fully. The thought of confronting Daniel loomed over me like a dark cloud. After a quick breakfast, we set off down the familiar trails, the crisp air filling our lungs. The beauty of the landscape surrounded us, tall pines reaching for the sky, the ground littered with vibrant autumn leaves. But I felt detached, my mind racing with thoughts of Daniel. "Do you remember the last time we hiked this trail?" Quinn asked, trying to draw me back into the moment. "Yeah," I replied, forcing a smile. "We got lost and ended up having that picnic by the lake." She laughed, the sound echoing through the trees. "And we ended up sharing that bottle of wine, too." The memory ignited something within me, a reminder of the carefree days we had shared. I glanced at her, seeing the light in her eyes, and my heart ached for the connection we were trying to restore. As we reached a clearing, I turned to her, the urgency of my thoughts pressing against my chest. "Quinn, I need to talk about Daniel." Her smile faded slightly, replaced with a flicker of apprehension. "Kurt, just let me say this," I interrupted, feeling the adrenaline course through me. "I can't keep pretending everything is fine when I know there's something between you two." She took a deep breath, her gaze dropping to the ground. "It's complicated, Kurt. I never meant for it to happen." I stepped closer, my heart pounding. "Then let me understand. What is it that you feel for him? Is it real? Or is it just a distraction?" Quinn hesitated, her expression conflicted. He's charming. He makes me feel special. But that doesn't change what we have, Kurt. I love you." Her admission struck me like lightning. "But you're still drawn to him." "It's not that simple," she exclaimed, frustration mingling with anguish in her voice. "I'm trying to figure things out. I didn't plan for this. I need to confront him," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I need to know what's really going on between you two." Quinn's eyes widened. "Kurt, please. Let me handle this," I insisted, sensing the need for resolution. "I can't go on like this." As we stood there, the tension between us palpable, I felt a surge of desire mixed with the urgency of the moment. I reached for her, pulling her close, feeling the heat radiating from her body. "You have to trust me," I murmured, our foreheads nearly touching. "I do trust you," she replied, her breath hitching slightly. But please, think about what you're doing. In that moment, I couldn't help myself. The longing and frustration boiled over, and I captured her lips with mine again, pouring every ounce of emotion into the kiss. It was desperate, a plea for connection amidst the chaos. Quinn melted against me, her hands gripping my arms as we lost ourselves in each other once more. But as we pulled away, reality crashed back in. "I love you, Kurt," she whispered, her eyes searching mine. "I don't want to lose you." "Then help me understand," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. "I want to fight for us, but I need the truth." After our hike, we returned to the cabin, the silence heavy between us. I felt a knot forming in my stomach, the anticipation of confronting Daniel pressing down like a weight. I couldn't let fear hold me back any longer. That afternoon, I took a moment to collect myself, pacing the small living room as I waited for Quinn to finish showering. My heart raced as I thought about what I would say to him, the man who had crossed an invisible line into my marriage. When Quinn emerged, her hair damp and cascading down her shoulders, I felt a rush of desire mixed with my anxiety. "You look beautiful," I said, my voice catching in my throat. "Thanks," she replied, a soft smile playing on her lips. But I could see the tension still lingered in her eyes. "Are you okay?" she asked, concern evident. "Yeah," I said, trying to sound convincing. "I just have to make a call." She nodded, her expression a mix of worry and understanding. "Just be careful." As I stepped outside to make the call, the cool air hit me like a splash of cold water. I took a deep breath, steadying myself before dialing Daniel's number. My heart pounded in my chest, each ring echoing my apprehension. When he finally picked up, his voice was smooth and confident. "Kurt! Good to hear from you." "Daniel," I said, trying to keep my tone steady. "I need to talk to you." "Can we meet?" "Sure, what's this about?" I hesitated, feeling the weight of the moment. "It's about Quinn." There was a pause on the other end, and I could sense the tension building. "I see. Where do you want to meet?" I suggested a nearby cafe, a place where we could talk without distractions. As I hung up, my heart raced with anticipation. I was about to confront the man who had threatened my marriage, and I felt a surge of determination wash over me. When I returned to the cabin, Quinn was waiting for me, her expression a mix of concern and apprehension. "What did he say?" "I set up a meeting," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need to know what's really going on between you two." She reached out, placing a hand on my arm. "Kurt, please be careful. I don't want you to get hurt." "I'll be fine," I assured her, though the uncertainty gnawed at me. We spent the rest of the day trying to maintain a semblance of normalcy, but the undercurrent of tension remained. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the cabin, I felt a mix of emotions swirling within me. Later that evening, as we prepared dinner, I felt the weight of what was coming pressing down on me. Quinn was bustling about the kitchen, her energy infectious, and I tried to push aside my apprehension. "Let's make this special," I suggested, trying to lighten the mood. "How about a candlelit dinner?" Her eyes lit up, and for a moment, the tension melted away. "I'd love that," she said, her smile genuine. As we set the table, I couldn't help but steal glances at her, the way her laughter filled the room, the sparkle in her eyes. I longed for the intimacy we had shared, the moments that felt like they belonged only to us. When dinner was finally ready, we sat together at the table, candles flickering softly between us. We shared stories and memories, laughter flowing freely, but the shadow of my impending confrontation with Daniel loomed over us like a storm cloud. "Thank you for tonight," Quinn said, her eyes warm as she reached across the table, taking my hand in hers. "I want us to remember this," I replied, squeezing her hand gently. "No matter what happens tomorrow." As we finished our meal, the warmth of the evening wrapped around us, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the peace we had found was merely a temporary reprieve. After dinner, as we cleared the table, I felt an overwhelming desire to hold her close, to remind myself of what I was fighting for. "Come here," I said, pulling her into my arms. The moment felt electric, the heat radiating between us igniting a longing I could no longer ignore. Are you sure? She whispered, her breath warm against my skin. I need you, I replied, the words escaping before I could think. Our lips met in a passionate kiss, and I felt the world around us fade away once more. The warmth of her body against mine was intoxicating, and I lost myself in the moment, pouring all my fears and desires into the kiss. As our bodies pressed together, I felt the urgency of the night, the heat of our passion consuming us both. The kitchen, with its flickering candles and remnants of dinner, became a sanctuary where the outside world faded away. Quinn melted into me, her body responding instinctively, as if we were two pieces of a puzzle finally fitting together after so much disarray. With each kiss, the tension that had been building for days began to dissolve. My hands roamed over her back, feeling the softness of her skin beneath her shirt, while her fingers tangled in my hair, pulling me closer. It was a dance of longing and desperation, an attempt to reclaim the intimacy we had almost lost. Let's take this to the bedroom, I murmured against her lips, my voice thick with desire. Quinn nodded, her eyes filled with a mix of excitement and vulnerability. We hurried down the hallway, urgency propelling us forward. Once in the bedroom, I closed the door behind us, shutting out the world and sealing us in our own private realm. The moment we were alone, I pushed her gently against the door, kissing her deeply as our bodies pressed together. I felt the warmth of her skin against mine, the familiar weight of her in my arms, and I knew I was home. Every doubt and fear that had plagued me melted away, replaced by a fierce desire to connect with her completely. Quinn wrapped her legs around my waist, her body instinctively urging me closer. I carried her to the bed, setting her down gently, our kisses growing more passionate as we explored each other's bodies. I took my time, savoring the softness of her skin, the taste of her lips, the way she responded to my touch. As we tangled in the sheets, the world outside faded into oblivion. We shared whispers of affection and laughter, intertwining our bodies as if to erase the shadows of doubt that had loomed over us for so long. The intimacy we rekindled felt electric, each touch igniting a fire that had been dormant for too long. Promise me you'll talk to Daniel after this, she whispered between kisses, her voice low and serious. I promise, I replied, my heart racing. But right now, let's focus on us. We lost ourselves in each other, the passion building between us until it reached a crescendo. Every moment felt sacred, a reminder of what we had fought for. As I held her close, feeling her heartbeat against my chest, I realized that this connection was worth every struggle we had faced. Time seemed to stand still as we surrendered to our desires, each movement a testament to our love and commitment to one another. In the throes of passion, we became one, merging our bodies and souls as we explored the depths of our connection. It was raw, intimate, and utterly liberating. Eventually, as the night deepened, we lay entwined beneath the covers, the soft glow of the candles flickering around us. I could feel Quinn's heartbeat against my skin, and in that moment I knew we had weathered a storm together. Thank you for tonight, she said softly, her fingers tracing patterns on my chest. I needed this, I replied, feeling a profound sense of relief wash over me. I needed you. We lay in comfortable silence, our breaths slowly returning to normal, but the reality of our situation was still at the forefront of my mind. I couldn't ignore the conversation I needed to have with Daniel, the confrontation that would ultimately determine the course of our future. As dawn began to break, casting a soft light through the window, I knew I had to face the truth. I turned to Quinn, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Today I'll talk to him. She nodded, a mixture of support and anxiety in her eyes. Just be careful, Kurt. I love you. I love you too, I said, my heart full of determination. With that, I got up, ready to confront whatever awaited me outside the comfort of our cabin. I would do whatever it took to protect the love we had fought so hard to reclaim, to ensure that the intimacy we had rediscovered wouldn't slip away again. As I prepared to leave, I took one last look at Quinn, her beautiful face illuminated by the morning light. I knew that no matter the outcome, I would always cherish the connection we shared and the love that had brought us back together. With a steely resolve, I stepped outside, ready to face Daniel, armed with the truth and the love that bound Quinn and me. The path ahead was uncertain, but I was ready to fight for our future, no matter the cost.